at this point, we will we'll go ahead and move on to the agenda item, Information Management Plan, Fiscal Year 11, Report of Project Proposals Update, Chief of Game, Larry Anderson, and Game Division Staff, Informational.
For the record, Larry Anderson, Chief of Game. Well, the place we're at with this is we have a draft plan we've been working on, and we haven't had a predator management meeting yet to look at the project proposals to go forward for this year. So this is almost done, the draft. I have actually put some stuff in it this morning, and I was working on the table of contents just before now. So don't look at your table of contents, it's not even close. But for the past several years, the format of this has been set up to where we kind of reported the whole thing in two different parts. We talked about the projects and how they went last year, and then we had another section that proposed projects, and there was a lot of redundancy. And so the way I've set it up this year is they're just, all the projects are listed once, and I show the amounts that were spent and budgeted, the projected amounts. I've worked with Wildlife Services to get those, and then I've actually added some tables for all of them that show the expenditures and predator removal by year now, so you can get a long-term look at each project. I've gone through and set it up so that now there'll be a report for most of them on each fiscal, just a little summary so that you can see where we've been, and then at the end we will propose to go forward or not. And right now we're looking at continuing the same projects that we had last year on through to this year. We made a few adjustments with Wildlife Services. We've looked at some of this in the biologist and added some mountain ranges in places like on Project 6, the Delamars. We made sure we included adjacent mountain ranges that you know, we might need to include when animals are moving back and forth. On Project 22, that's the big project where we've been identifying quite a few areas in there that we might want to do project work based on biologist input. I've talked with Mark about that and just told him that we might as well make that statewide, and just based on criteria that we would need to go forward with predator control or predator management, along with biologist input. So we're hoping that our biologists will be the ones that are letting us know where they feel we need to go. And it also gives us that flexibility on bighorn transplants, that if we need to go in there, if it's identified that we need to go in there and do some work just before the transplant, during and after, it leaves us that flexibility to go there. So those are some of the changes, and so for the next meeting, I hope that we will be able to finalize this and go forward. On the table on the very last page, at the top, it shows all those projects that we did last year, and there's all zeros in the amount for next year. The amounts that Wildlife Services provided me, their estimates of what they think they would need to accomplish their work next year, are in here, and it'll be under each project. It says fiscal 12 projected expenditures, so they're in there, but they're not approved yet. So I didn't put any numbers in there. That's why these are all zeros. So the next meeting would be we'd come forward with the actual amounts moved into there. So normally it would be after a wildlife damage management, a predator management committee meeting. We would come forward with those proposals and projected amounts for the next fiscal. So, but I do have those amounts as estimated by Wildlife Services, so you can see them there in here. So almost everything I think you need should be in here to get, read up on it and be prepared for the next meeting. You should be able to evaluate it and make decisions and decide where we're going to go. So, any specific questions?
I guess one comment from me is that we will be getting assignments on committees, and so we'll get a new committee designations out. And so are you suggesting that maybe we get a committee right before the September commission meeting, and then have it ready to present in the September meeting?
I think it would be helpful to try to have a committee meeting fairly early, probably, you know, a couple of weeks before, just so we can actually get the amounts put in this table, and so that the support material actually is more finalized at that point for the next meeting. So we probably should be looking at having that meeting fairly soon, probably, that subcommittee meeting, so that they can make those kinds of recommendations to put in here, a proposed type.
How far in advance of?
Well, Suzanne.
I'm over here.
See, there you are,
I
Suzanne.
think I need the support material right after Labor Day.
Right after Labor Day.
I think I have their calendar.
But it's okay, because if, you know, at that meeting, if the amounts are changed, then we just would amend that last table. It's only the last table, and we can send it out and attach it. You know, and it's available on our website, and, you know, we ended up, I think, doing that last year, getting the final numbers, because sometimes the budget is not completely done until sometime in September anyway, so sometimes we have to adjust a few numbers, get the final numbers, so it's okay. But bottom line is, you know, we can bring this forward in almost completed form for the next meeting, I think. Should be able to be just really close. And then if we make some small adjustments or something at that meeting, it would just be, I would guess, in that budget right in the end, in the back, we can send that out again, fix it. You know, just people can add that on to the one they already have if they want to keep a copy, and we'll change it on the website, that kind of thing, so we'll be up to date. So it's not that critical, you know, that we have, because the final numbers approved by the commission and everything are the ones that we'll finally put in that table at the end anyway. So.
Okay, any commissioners have any questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Larry. I guess that was informational, and I don't have to take public comment, but if anybody quickly has anything they'd like to add or comment on, I could take it now. Okay, move on. Okay, 13 is off, 14 is off. We're on the informational reports, agenda item 15, and the first one, A, 2011 Nevada State Legislature Session Report, Management Analyst 3, Kim. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Kim Jelly with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. In your packets and online was this report here. I think the cabs all got it early. And it's a very brief synopsis of what the bills were about. A lot of these, the commission and the cabs have already reviewed many times. The last 2 pages, I have text here of paragraphs of what we consider the high priority bills that are marked with asterisks throughout the little matrix there. So I think it's self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, I can try to address them.
Commissioner McNinch, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Kim, on AB 307, it's referencing just adopting. It's an administrative aspect rather than a commission, and it might be worth kind of explaining to us what.
Okay. And if Elmer's still here, I may have him come up, because we are right in the midst of developing these regulations. And because of the specific way that this legislation was drafted, when it was legislation before it was signed, we did go through those questions with our DAG and the governor's office and Randy Stevenson at LCD and so on and so forth. And that was something that the bill authors and the energy industry and the supporters were specific about, that it be, because there are other offices that do this way, where it's the department that adopts regulations. And so that, we did pose that question, so that would be, the reason we put it in there is just so that people note that the audience here is different. When we get regulations that are related to hunting, obviously they go through the CAB process and the commission process. This audience here obviously is going to be energy developers that are typically go to PUC or go to the energy office for regulations, and so it's still a public process. It's still open to everyone, but that's going to be more of the key audience. So does that make sense?
You know, yes and no. There's a certain level of, you know, that typically there's some kind of a due diligence built into these regulations. So who would they appeal to if they had questions and concerns? I guess those are kind of the some administrative things that started to pop into my mind, because I don't understand it completely, and
we're learning as well. It's a new process for us. That the Office of Energy, which is under the governor's office, is working in the legislation. It says in collaboration with the Office of Energy, so it's not an NDOW only process by any means. We've been going back and forth with the Office of Energy, and then we'll go forward with the governor's office. And so there's still, I assume, the same processes to appeal the decisions to the various groups. And I don't know how it's going to work. We'll all have, because the energy office has a DAG who's here actually, and our DAG. So it's going to be, I guess, a learning process, and certainly we're open to comments or suggestions. When we haven't submitted it officially yet to LCD, but I'm sure we'll get comments back from them.
it looks like you're on a real tight time frame.
October 1st is when the legislation says it's to be adopted, but obviously we have no control over LCD and those kind of things. So we're pushing hard to get it through, but just to get the language back. But I don't know that anything is gonna.
I guess, you know, it's not like we don't have anything to do over the next few meetings here, but I guess I would be curious to understand that process a little bit more. I mean, I trust that everything's fine, that's not my concern, but it's a point of interest to me. It's a little different than I think what we deal with, and you know, maybe a better understanding of it somewhere along the way would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, Ken Mayer for the record. I sat there dumbfounded myself, not realizing that NDOW can actually promulgate regulations on its own without this commission. I actually, in a meeting, said, well, where's the commission part of the regulatory process? And it was pointed out to me by the attorneys in the room that this is something that they want and the department has the ability to do, establish regulations on their own relative to this particular issue. And I appealed that to Randy Stevenson at LCB, and I said, is that correct? And the answer came back as yes, the way the legislation is written, that the department then establishes the regulations. So I take it that we will hold a hearing similar to this hearing. I will preside over the hearing. We'll put the regulations out for public review and notice, and we'll have a hearing, take public input, and make a final decision. So it's a new wave for us as well.
No more questions. I just want to point out, because we did just finish a legislative session, however, you know it's coming again, February 2013, and typically we have to submit our bill draft request to the governor's office by early May 2012. So that means probably February and March, I think we have meetings then, would be the best time to be circulating language. And so if anyone has burning ideas that they want to see illustrated in legislation, please let us know.
Commissioner Drew.
Sorry, Kim, didn't want to let you off that easy. In terms of SB 226 regarding trapping, I see that you're preparing some regulations in conjunction with interested parties. Can you give me an update on where you're at with that and who the interested parties might be at this point?
That's a task list, actually. I don't think that law enforcement has completed that, or maybe they haven't even, I don't know, further out with that. But that is something that, as you can see, the commission has to adopt on or before December 31st, 2012. And I have been receiving emails and phone calls from some of the other interested parties. Can't remember the name of the association, but of the nuisance control parties that want to know when is this coming soon? When is this coming? And so, go ahead.
Mayor, for the record, I did get a couple phone calls from Trish Swain and asked where we were in the process, and I told her that we were full up for August, but certainly is something we could bring to the commission's agenda in September to kind of kick it off. It seemed like there's a heck of a lot of work we've already done, plus we had the legislation. So we need to kind of start there and make sure that people that want to be involved in those discussions are involved in it. And so my plan was, I told us that I would talk to the chairman and try to get it on the agenda as a kind of a kickoff, get some instructions from the commission, which direction you want to go, what people we want to be involved in a working group, if you will, to bring regulations to you, and what we can come up with a time frame for that to be accomplished. And she appreciated it because she was busy in August as well. I know a number of the other folks I talked to that were on the original group that were also busy. So we have till this 2012. We quite frankly, I'd rather have something by winter time when traffic is in full swing. So it's just possible to do.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put it on the record that Nevada Farm Bureau wants to be a part of that process.
And we readily accept that. That's a great addition. And we want to take a look. We'll tell you who's been on that working group, and then if we have some other ideas, other people may want to be involved as well. We don't want to get so large that we can't move because it's too big, but certainly with all the different perspectives, we need to be on that working group.
I want to point out that the everything that we did earlier, back last December, was solely related to Washoe County, and that the legislation itself now has expanded, and so we're going to have other urban areas. I think the population is 100,000 is the break point, and so I'm not sure if that still is just Las Vegas and Reno, or if it involves some of the other communities, but I can sense, based on the discussions I've had with, for instance, the trappers, as well as the trail safe folks, that it's going to come down to defining the geographical areas where where we cannot, where they can and cannot trap. And obviously we're talking about public lands, a lot of the public lands, and so anyway, there's going to be I think it's going to be an interesting balancing act to get those regulations and those geographical boundaries set.
I have spoken with Sabra Smith Newby, who is the Clark County, I think, Administrative Services Director. She's a department head over there, who said we can be in conversations with her because her agency or her department oversees what they call populated areas. We call congested areas in Washoe County. So we can definitely, they have it designated in Clark County, as you said.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Commissioner Drew?
I just quickly state that I support kicking this off in September. I know we've got some time, but I think the sooner the better, because it needs to be collaborative if we're going to make this thing work. So.
Any other commissioners? Okay, moving on to 15B, the Finance Committee report, Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On our agenda, we had one item that I requested be made an action item. And the committee of two approved it, and basically what I was asking for was that because of the fact that we have by law the possibility of having 9 commission meetings a year, it seemed to me it would be prudent to go ahead and budget for 9 commission meetings a year. That way we wouldn't have to have a quandary if something came up on the spur of the moment where we had to go back to the budget office to try and get it funded. If we already had it approved, I mean, we don't have to use the money, but if we did have to have it, it would be there already. And it just seemed reasonable to me, and I believe Patrick Cates concurred that it wouldn't hurt a thing, because as far as the funds were concerned, if they weren't used, they just go back.
Okay.
The other, you want to go down the list? Patrick probably could give you a briefer synopsis than I could, because I have a tendency to repeat.
For the record, Patrick Cates. On the issue of budgeting for additional meetings, the amount of money that we have budgeted for the current fiscal year is $32,689. That was increased from the base budget based on the commission's vote to allow full funding for commissioners to go to WAFLA. Which is where we ran into problems last year with commission expenditures. We incurred more expenditures in out-of-state travel than we were budgeted. And as I stated last year, going to IFC because of out-of-state increases in out-of-state travel is problematic and not well received. So last year I said that we would wait as late in the year as possible to see what the true need was, try to minimize that, and then go to IFC. Well, we did so. They weren't happy with that. They rejected the request to increase the budget. This year with the $32,689, I projected out for the meetings that we do have scheduled, the 7 meetings that we currently have scheduled, and the budget appears to be adequate to meet the needs of that schedule. If it is the pleasure of the commission to add an additional meeting, we would go forward early with the work program. You know, last time they rejected our work program request, I think a lot of that had to do with the out-of-state travel. It would obviously be up to IFC, but I'd have less concerns about that than about going because we busted out-of-state travel. But as of right now, we have ample money for the current schedule of meetings.
Just a quick question. Is the extra meeting that we've had every other year during the legislative session, is that the 9th meeting, the potential 9th meeting, or is that that's a separate meeting?
We can hold 9 meetings, but we traditionally have, since I've been here, tried to hold that to 7. And that's the trend in government, is try to hold fewer meetings if you possibly can. We have had some emergency meetings, if you remember, for a couple of years on the legislative aspect of it. There was a quick, short thing, or it was telephonic. There's still a lot of staff support that's involved in that, but not direct dollars out of your budget, out of the commission's line item in the budget. But it's been 7. We've added emergency if we needed to.
And one of those meetings that is scheduled is it's the March meeting where we traditionally have done a CAB workshop, and that's kind of been the focus of that meeting. We had talked about maybe that would be every other year instead of every year, or you could use that to meet needs for other purposes. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility maybe there with the March meeting that's already scheduled.
Yeah, Patrick makes a good point. That, every meeting seems to be full of some regulatory aspect that we need to deal with, whether it's approving the duck stamp or, seasons. But March is the one that's got flexibility. There's nothing really we have to do that particular meeting. So we use that for the CAB workshops.
Okay, Commissioner Howell, is that good for you?
Well, actually, no, there was quite a bit we reviewed, and I guess Patrick and I together can go over it with you. On item 7, the vacancy report, informational item only, is there's quite a few vacancies in Dow that have been vacant since last year. And they are, as I understand it, looking at eliminating a few of those positions, and probably the legislature will demand that they do. So that was discussed.
If I could speak to that
Yeah.
just a little more specifically, y'all may remember when we went through our budget presentations. Did I just say y'all? I did.
You did. Y'all plural.
We had identified a list of positions that we were proposing for elimination. We had that issue where we had this large payroll number that they were making us balance to that wasn't realistic. And so we had a series of proposals, including position eliminations. Those positions that are still currently vacant, we are continuing to hold vacant. We do still have concerns, in particular, about the voting program because the revenue has declined. So those positions, if they're vacant, we've been continuing to hold them vacant, kind of seeing what happens unless something major changes. I expect those will be going by the wayside. And one example is we have a marketing coordinator in conservation education. That position was funded several years ago with tourism funds. That funding went away, so we started using general funds. The general funds have went away. Now the only thing will be left will be license dollars. It's been vacant for some time, and no expectation it's going to be filled. So there are a few of those.
We also discussed an overtime report, and the total paid overtime dollars was less than $40,000, $30,800 for 240-something employees. It didn't seem unreasonable to me. There is some accrued comp hours, and Patrick, you could probably explain that a little better as far as some of that can be used for extra days off.
Right. Employees have the option, if they're authorized to work overtime, to either receive that as pay or as compensatory time. Because of the fiscal crisis the state has been in, it was Governor Gibbons put out an executive order about overtime, and we instituted a policy that we would only pay it as compensatory time. Compensatory time is accrued at time and a half. It accrues like their annual leave. And we try to work on people using that time rather than having to pay that out. Despite having a policy that says we'll only pay accrued comp time, we did have some paid overtime. In operations, we had about $10,000 worth of paid overtime for our pilots. Traditionally, they've always been paid overtime just because of the schedules that they have to work. I became aware of that early in the fiscal year, and I worked with Bob Hoyne, the division chief, about the policy, and they're now all on comp time. Wardens, for law enforcement, there is a little bit of paid overtime that they get that comes from the casinos in Upland. When they have to close the river for the casinos to do their fireworks, they actually pay us to pay those wardens directly. It's not a lot, but there's a little bit of that. And we also had some paid overtime in law enforcement for the wardens related to an administrative issue with the Department of Personnel. They often get holiday premium pay because they're working on a holiday. That's time and a half. In the past, that had been paid as compensatory time, and then when they looked at the regulations and realized that that had a negative impact on their calculations for the retirement benefits, so we went back and reversed that from compensatory time to paid holiday premium pay. It wasn't a lot, but it was a one-time adjustment to try to fix that. Other than that, our accrued comp time is up this year a bit. Mostly that's been because of the number of vacancies we had. In addition to the ones that we're purposefully holding vacant for salary savings, we've had a lot of vacancies, especially in law enforcement in the South in particular. But it's something we monitor closely, and one of the things I pointed out is internally we're really trying to strategize about how to keep even closer tabs on that, because with the budget splits, we now have 8 different budget accounts that our payroll is scattered across, and trying to manage that and make sure we come in budget is a bigger challenge. You know, we have unforeseen costs if somebody retires that can have big payouts, and we want to make sure we don't blow our payroll category. So it's something we monitor closely.
The last item that we reviewed was the out-of-state travel, which last year we only had numbers for 6 months, and the total was 50,000. So if you double that for the year, you come up with 100,000. And last year when we had this discussion, Patrick said that he expected that to come down considerably, and I'm happy to say that it's come down quite a bit. It's 65,570. So I complimented him on that, in that area. They did bring it down quite a bit. And I'd just like to say that Patrick has done a terrific job trying to explain this to an old guy that only worked in the private sector my whole life. I only worked in the state sector, and I've learned a whole lot about the way they do things different in the government. Thank you, Patrick.
Commissioner McNinch has a question.
I guess not so much a partial question, I guess. Do you have caps on your comp time that can be accrued?
Yes.
240?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is typical, Commissioner Howell, of government. And what happens is when you hit that cap, because you don't have the option of taking the pay, that means that you're going to have somebody that can't work overtime because they'll be working for free basically. So there's a certain level of, you know, you can get away with this under that scenario, and then it just stops. I mean, you lose the ability to manage an agency, the amount of time that you need to manage it, and it gets very complex after a while. And either that or they burn it to lower their what they've accrued, which means that they're out of the office and they're not available. So it gets complicated.
It is, and in addition to all those tools to try to manage it, we look at available funding at the end of each fiscal year, and if we have the ability to, we pay that down, pay down a portion of it, pay down all of it, and we've usually been able to lower those balances at the end of the year when we know we have funding, as opposed to paying it as we go and getting in a bind. So that helps too. Could I just add one thing, if I may? And you know, I had packages of all the material, and I think they all got distributed to the public. So if any of the commissioners that were on the panel want any of this stuff, it's on the website. But I'd be happy to get you hard copies if you'd like it. One thing that we talked about that I think is really important for the commission is the process to review the budget, the department's budget, before it gets submitted to the budget office. We had difficulties with that last year because of the budget split, just that process of trying to do that. It was really impossible to give any kind of complete numbers prior to the statutory deadline. Now that we'll be in a normal budget cycle, I don't anticipate that being a problem at all. We talked about a time frame starting in January of next year. That spring, that would be a time that we would be generating budget ideas, identifying equipment needs. That would be a very good time to share that with the commission and solicit input from the commission of directions they think we need to go with our budget. And then as we get later into the year, into the summer, June, early July, we should have near final numbers of what our budget should look like and give the commission an opportunity to look at that and weigh in before the deadline. And I think that'll work. I envision a series of maybe 3 or 4 commission meetings where you have a chance to give some input on that.
Okay, any further questions on the finance informational item? Seeing none, why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break and make it 12 minutes.